Lesson 2, Oracle Net Services in a Data Guard environment. In this lesson, we will discuss the basics of Oracle Net Services and how to configure client connectivity in a Data Guard configuration. And we will also review Data Guard best practice solutions in network setup. So let's start with the Oracle Net Services. The Oracle Net Service, it allows us to make a remote connection from client side to Oracle database instance. In this diagram, the component in the left-hand side is a client, and also there is a listener component, and also Oracle database. When user requests the connection, this connection is forwarded to a listener component. The listener is responsible to spawn dedicated server process, and then this dedicated server process will be authenticated, and then address of a dedicated server process is returned back to client. Finally, client knows the location of the dedicated server process. So client eventually makes connection to database instance by going through dedicated server process. And this is called a session. So in order to create a session, your client must go through a listener eventually to make connection to Oracle database instance. So your remote connection is available by configuring and by going through Oracle Net Services. In the Data Guard environment, configuring Oracle Net Services is very important, because in the Data Guard environment, your primary database communicate with the standby databases through Oracle Net Services. So if a network configuration fails, then primary database cannot communicate with the standby database, so your redo shipping will fail. And also, when you perform role transition service, making primary as a standby, standby as a primary, in that case, redo shipping must be the other way around, and that's possible by configuring Oracle Net Services correctly, and also by using a few init parameters. And also when you create physical standby database, and also when you create other standby databases, primary database connect to a physical standby database, and then in the last stage of a physical standby database creation, the physical standby database must be restarted. To do so, in order to restart database remotely, we also have to configure Oracle Net Services properly to be able to restart a standby database remotely. And also, if there is a network issue in the Data Guard environment, and in order to resolve redo gap issue, Oracle also uses Oracle Net Service to communicate with the primary database from standby database to resolve redo gap. So there are many component that use Oracle Net Service. So understanding Oracle Net Services in the Data Guard environment is very important. Okay, so here we have understanding name resolution. This is the way to configure client-side Oracle Net Service. From the client side, in order to connect to Oracle database instance, the client must provide at least four components. Number one, provide the address of listener, because the listener is the first component that handles connection request. So provide the host name where listener is running. If this were a standalone environment, then the local listener will take care of a client connection request. If this were a real application cluster environment, then scan listener will take care of connection request. The second information is protocol. Which protocol you want to use to communicate with the database instance from client. And the third component is port number. So through which port you want to communicate. And also finally, service name. So we connect to database instance where service is running. So you will have to provide the service information unless you are using SID to make connection. Because the service giving us a lot more benefit, most likely service is used when communicating with the Oracle database. Now, these four items can be shared with. Items can be shared and provided by going through local naming method, meaning that use a static text-based configuration file. That's a TNS names.ora file. Its default location is Oracle Home Network Admin Directory. And also, we can use centralized name service, directory name service. And also, you can use a simple hard-coded string. You provide the address directly in the OS prompt or SQL prompt. That's an easy connect method. And also, we have external naming as well. So if you are using a third-party naming service, and that's called external naming. So we have different ways to provide the network-related information. In our practice environment and class environment, we are going to use local naming method, and also some case easy connect method. Okay, so let's get into local naming configuration file. Location of a local naming method configuration file is under Oracle Software Home Directory. And under that, you will see Network and Admin Directory. So that location, you will see TNS names.ora file, and you also have a SQLnet ORA file. So SQLnet, it give us which communication method you want to use, how you want to communicate. And TNS names.ora file, it include the service name information, host where local listener is running in the standalone environment, and protocol and port number information. That's available. Even in the database server and database host, we have a TNS names the file and also SQLnet file as well. Now, if this were in a clustered environment, your the TNS names, the ORA file, SQLnet ORA file, it's also same. You have a client side, and also in the each rack instance location, we also have a SQLnet and also TNS names, the ORA file. So this is actually an example in the data guard example. In the TNS names.ora file, we can actually configure net service name, which is an alias that is referring to network related information. when you go to Oracle Home Network Admin tnsnames.ora file, you have one of the entry here. This is an example. London is referring to host name where local listener is running, in this example host 03, and also communication method protocol TCP port number 1521. And also this alias or net service name is to connect to the instance where london.example.com service is running. So that is in a network definition by going through London entry. Now we can use this as the definition when you configure init parameter or parameters to be used for data guard operation. For example, if you want to configure redo transport service, especially remote archive destination, we're going to use log archive dest and number. And in this example, log archive dest 2, it is to transport redo to London. It's not service name. This is a net service name. So it is to transport redo to the host 01, host 03, where london.example.com service is available, is running. So this will be one example of using Oracle the net service. And another one is we also use Oracle net service to provide the access to a primary database. In this example, we have a PRMY net service name. It is referring to two different locations. One is host 01, where local listener is running. Host 03 is another location. And also service name is prmy.example.com. Now if you want to create a service to run only when database currently running as a primary, so which is a role-based service, if that is the case, you can add multiple entries, because primary database could be running out of a host 01, or primary database could be running out of a host 03 based on current database role. So if your database, if your current primary database location is a host 01, then service will be running out of a host 01. So when you make connection using PRMY, your session will be established to the database instance running out of a host 01. However, as part of a switchover and failover, if your database, primary database running out of a host 03, then if a first attempt fails, because now host 01 is not primary database location anymore, then as part of a failover feature, we can also try to make connection to host 03 database instance. So we can add more than one addresses, and then we connect to one host at a time to see which host is the location of the database instance where a primary database role is assigned. So you can actually use multiple entries as well. Now let's talk about server-side configuration. In the server-side configuration, we have a listener.ora file. In the listener.ora file, we have basic entries. Here we have a listener, and also we have an address. So this listener is running out of a host 03, and this listener listening on port number 1521. So this information is available here. And also you can add additional information to support data guard and I will touch this this topic in next few pages. So you will have to configure listener to receive a request coming from primary database and to support connection to database instance. Okay, here we have a dynamic service registration. Okay, so in order to support database connection, we register service and listener receive all service registration requests. And service registered by going through init parameters dynamically. For example, I have a database and it has its own SP file, init parameter file. And init parameter file include the DB unique name and database name and DB domain and also service names and also instance name. Okay, so you may have a service called PRMY. And then service information is registered to the local listener or remote listener to support connection to database instance of a database. So all of the information is by going through init parameter file content. So we register service in the listener to support connection to database instance of a database. So all of this information will be registered in the local listener. And if you shut down database instance, then your service will get removed from the listener. But when you restart database, then those information also available again in the database, in the local listener, in the standalone environment. So we dynamically register service information back and forth based on database instance status. But in the data guard environment, we need static service registration, which means that along with the dynamic registration through init parameters, we also need a static service registration. Meaning that regardless of a database instance, your listener must be aware of certain services in the data guard environment to support RMAN, especially creation of a physical standby database, and also to support data guard broker operation, for example, role transition service. So we use actually a static service registration. So through the listener configuration file, we update the service information in the listener file. So we have a london.example.com. This service must be stick with the listener regardless of your database instance. And also London DGMGRL. And this is the one used by data guard broker. The first one is used by RMAN. Okay, so we have a service registered in the listener configuration file. So your listener always recognize these services, regardless of your database instance status. Okay, so optimizing Oracle Net for Data Guard. We have a best practice. The best practice for TCP socket buffer size recommendation is network bandwidth and latency multiplied by 3. So that's actually the best practice. And then we're gonna set TNS names and listener.ora file for send and receive TCP socket buffer based on the TCP socket buffer size calculated by network bandwidth and latency multiplied by 3, or 10 megabytes, whichever larger. In our practice environment, we go with the 10 megabytes. And also, your session data unit, default is small. I believe 8K is the default size. But we can use a bigger size as well, up to 2 megabytes. In our class environment, we're gonna use 64K in the tnsnames.ora and listener.ora file. And also in the SQLnet.ora file, we can disable TCP no delay option. So we can actually choose a couple of settings based on best practice, and that's recommended. Okay, so let's take a look at quiz. Running the Oracle database pre-installed 19C package is sufficient to set up operating system kernel parameters for an Oracle Linux Data Guard environment using best practice guidelines. In our practice environment, you will notice that we have this package installed. However, for network setting, like a TCP socket buffer size, that's not enough when you compare with the Oracle's best practice. So we have to change it manually. So the answer is false. In order to use the connect time failover feature, the failover clause must be included in the tnsnames.ora file. No, so this is false. As long as you have more than one addresses in the list, Oracle will choose the one address at a time until connection is successful. So the answer is false. This is lesson 2. Okay, so let's take a look at short demo. We learned Oracle Net Service configuration in Oracle Data Guard environment. So a couple of things. So let's take a look at client-side configuration. In my current environment, I have a Data Guard setup. And in host 01, I have a Boston primary database. I'm going to go to Oracle Home Directory and Network Admin. So it will show you multiple files. Let's take a look at TNS names.ora file. So as you can see here, we have a Boston. This is the net service name. It is referring to host 01 and port number and also service name. We also have best practices for the networking for TCP buffer size. So we have a sender buffer and receive buffer is 10 megabytes and SDU is 64K. Default size is too small. Default size is 8K. And also we have a net service name, Boston FarSync. And also we have another net service name, London. And we also have another net service name, London 2. And we have another net service name, London FarSync, and so on. So we have multiple entries in the tnsnames.ora file. And when you connect to your database, SQL Plus as sysdba, and we have a parameter, show parameter log archive dest _2. As you can see, we have a net service name configuration. So Boston FarSync is net service name. My current database is a primary database. In the primary database, transport redo to the location that is defined through the Boston FarSync. I have a physical standby database as well. And physical standby database, it's running out of host 03. So I can connect to host 03 and my physical standby database name is London. So I will log in as a sysdba. And here I have a show parameter Failover. Look at this. I have actually these entries. If there's a network outage between primary and standby database, and then once network comes back, the Failover, it uses this net service name, this net service name, this net service name to communicate with the file sync and also primary database, eventually to fetch missing redo. So what if you haven't configured the TNS names? Then what? Then there is no way to resynchronize it, other than manual copy of a missing redo. So in order to automate, we're gonna use this net service name. Now the other one is, now we're gonna take a look at server-side configuration. In the server-side configuration, let's take a look at this. Listener, control, status. When you look at this, we have a service name called prmy.example.com, and it is ready. Okay, and also Boston. Actually here boston.example.com, that's the service name. Now we have two entries. One is unknown, the other one is ready. Now the meaning of unknown means regardless of a database instance status, keep this service information. That's the meaning of it. Okay, and also ready means only when your primary database up and running, then register service. That's the meaning. For example, let me log in as a sysdba, and let me shut down database instance. Database shutdown is in progress right now. Okay, so let me exit out. And then when you check listener status, as you can see, everything is gone, but you have the boston.example.com directly registered through the listener. So even though your primary database is a shutdown state, we still have the service available. So for example, I can log in as a sys and Oracle underscore for you. We had a PRMY service, right? So we can use the PRMY as a sysdba. Hit enter. Look at this. I'm not able to connect. So meaning that I cannot even restart database. However, what if I can use if I use Boston? So I will log in as sys Oracle underscore for you at Boston as a sysdba. It allows us to connect, meaning that I can remotely start this database. In the data guard environment, there are few operations that require shutting down database and restarting up database. To support remote startup database, static service registration is very important, and this must be configured properly. After you start up a database instance, database will read init parameters to register service dynamically. So once you restart database, dynamic service registration, this will work as well. Okay, so now I'm going to exit out. So when you double check the status of a listener, and also when you check the existence of a service, now we have a lot more entries. So that is the difference between static service registration and dynamic service registration. We also have one thing here. Let's take a look at pre-install the RPM, pre-install in the RPM package. So we have a RPM. I will log in as a root user account. In my demo environment, it's the same as our practice environment. So in our demo and practice environment, we have a QA grep -I pre-install. So as you can see, we have a 19C version of a package is installed. However, for the network configuration setting, the default send and receive a TCP socket buffer is not enough. So as per best practice, it's a good idea to modify the default value. In your practice environment, you're going to review each entry that has been set with the best practices. That's what you're going to review. This is a quick demonstration. Let's do practice 2-1. It is to prepare the data guard environment. So we will update tnsnames.ora by adding multiple entries. In practice 2-1 overview section, it gives you a summary of a TNS name entries. So you will have to have a Boston to connect to primary database, Boston FS far sync, and this is to connect to far sync instance running out of a hostshare 2. And we will do this practice activity later on. We also need a TNS name entry to connect to physical standby database, which is in London. And we also have to have a net service name to connect to logical standby database. That's a London 2. And also we connect to London far sync that will be running out of a hostshare 4. And as part of a service practice activity in the data guard environment, we will also use PRMY net service name. And also we need the ORCL and RCAT CDB net service name for later practice activities. So this practice activity mainly for preparation. When you configure network environment, the network setting and network configuration is very important. So we're going to review, and also we're going to configure net service name through tnsnames.ora. We will also take a look at sqlnet.ora file as well. Since we're going to use GUI interface at some point, and we will have to open open terminal window, and then we're going to access to hostshare 1 with the -x option to use X window. I will start terminal window, and then I will connect to hostshare 1. This time, make sure you type dash uppercase X Oracle at host01, and password is Oracle. Let me double check here. I will exit out and I will copy paste. Sometimes when you copy paste, it copies hidden character, making dash as a long dash. But looks like when I copy paste it, it copied it correctly. So I can simply enter password to get into hostshare 1. And also in hostshare 1, I will set environment variable by using ORAENV script, and I will type Oracle seed. That's Boston. Because I'm in the hostshare 1, that's a primary database location. As part of a class setup, I created a hostshare 1-tns.ora file. So we simply copy this file as a reference to create tnsnames.ora and we place it in Oracle Home Network Admin Directory. So I'm going to copy this. So as you can see, if you recall, when you copy paste multiple lines at the OS prompt, you have a problem, copy paste the problem. So you will have to copy line by line at the OS level. So I will copy this and paste. And I will also copy SQLnet file. So SQLnet.ora file, it includes network control information. So how you want to communicate over the Oracle Net service and that information available. So I copied tnsnames.ora and SQLnet.ora file. And we're going to review these copied files using Oracle Net Manager utility. Since I connected to HostShare 1 using X-Window-X option, I can use GUI interface, netmgr. Okay, so it came up. So when you expand local, and you see the profile, and this will show you SQLnet content. In the SQLnet, make sure Easy Connect method is available, because as a part of a practice activity, especially when you connect to PDB in the physical standby database or logical standby database, we will use Easy Connection method. And then once you confirm that, then you will review tnsname entry. As you can see, Boston is already ready all the way through RCAT PDB. And also we have some additional thing that you will review. As a best practice, session data unit should be 535 as recommended. And also we have an advanced setting for the protocol parameter, total send buffer size, and also total receive buffer size. And these parameters had been set based on best practice values. So if you have time, you can review one by one. So all this, SDU setting, and also the protocol parameter settings will be same across all net service name entries. And that's part of your practice activity. So once you confirmed it, then you will exit, and you will also review same thing at the OS level. So you will access to Oracle Home Network Admin Directory. And you will look at SQLnet.ora file. As you can see, names.directory path, the Easy Connect method, this is now available. And let's take a look at cat tnsnames. Okay, so as you can see, it has lots of entries. Boston to connect to primary database. Boston far sync. It is to connect to Boston far sync that will be running out of HostShare 2. And also London to connect to physical standby database that will be running out of HostShare 3. And London 2 is a logical standby database that will be running out of HostShare 3. And London far sync is a far sync that will be running at HostShare 4. And also we have additional net service names. We use all additional net service name entries for the later practice activities. I highlighted the required net service name entries. During the practice time, you will have to make sure all these entries also available in your tnsnames.ora file. So once you confirm that, since we're going to have a same tnsname configuration file, entries, and content. Rather than looking at same file over and over, we simply execute a script to copy this reference file across all 4 servers, actually 3 remaining servers. And you have to type OS password. It's just simply Oracle, lowercase. So we are copying TNS names and also SQL.NET ORA file. This is for practice 2-1, configuration of a TNS names.ora file. Practice 2-2. Now we're going to get into configuring listener.ora configuration file. In this practice activity, we will register services that are required to create physical standby database, and also services that are required to restarting up of a databases remotely. For example, when you create physical standby database, we should be able to restart database remotely. And also, when you convert snapshot standby database to physical standby database, and also when you switch database role, the static service must be used to restart database automatically. So to support many of the data guard operations, we're going to update listener configuration file by adding additional entries through static service configuration. And that's what we're going to do as a part of a practice 2-2. If you already closed terminal window, you reopen it, and you're going to connect to host shell 1. And password is the same, Oracle. And also, I created a reference file, so you can create listener.ora file by copying it from the reference file. And if you want to copy paste, copy line by line to get rid of a copy paste the problem. And then we're going to review. Okay, so it looks like I copy pasted incorrectly. Okay, so the problem is I missed the step number 2. So I will set environment variable first. I will set environment variables for Boston, and I will copy again. So I missed the 1 step here. And then you're going to access to network file default directory, which is Oracle Home Network Admin. And we're going to review listener configuration file. In host shell 1, we're going to add the boston.example.com, and this will be used to support restarting up of a primary or standby database in case your Boston becomes standby database. So to support role transition service, we need a static service registration directly through listener configuration file. And also Boston DGMGRL. And this is a static service registration, and this will be used by DataGuard broker. And later on, we will discuss how to manage a DataGuard environment using DataGuard broker. So DataGuard broker will leverage this service. If your environment is a clustered environment, this is not needed because clusterware takes care of restarting up of your database. But in the standalone environment, this must be added. So once you review it, then you're going to reload your listener. Okay, it's just successful. Now we're going to open up second window to connect to second host. Actually, before that, let's do this way. I'm going to close this. We're going to actually run a script, and this script will copy the listener reference file across 3 remaining servers. So that way we don't have to manually update this during the practice time. In real embodiment, definitely you will have to check listener configuration file one by one manually. But in the class environment, in order to simplify the whole process, we use the reference files. And we're going to open up a second terminal window and connect to host 02. So I'm in the host 02, and I will set environment variable Boston FarSync. And let's take a look at listener configuration file in the second host. So we have a service registered directly through configuration file for FarSync, and also one for data guard broker. And we're going to restart or reload listener configuration information. Okay, good. I'm going to open new terminal window and connect to host 03. And this time I will set environment variable correctly, London. Okay, typo. London. And then I will change the directory to network configuration file default directory. In host 03, there will be 2 standby databases, one for physical and the other one is for logical standby database. So we have a London, and we have an entry for logical standby database, and we have each entry for data guard broker usage. So once you confirm that, then you're gonna restart or reload listener. Okay, good. Now I'm going to open new terminal window. And there's a reason why I'm opening a terminal window for each host, because later on you connect to host 01 to do practice activity, or you connect to host 03, or you connect to host 02. So we keep this in our terminal window for future practice activities. Now this time I'm connecting to host 04. And password London FarSync. And I will move on to the admin directory, network admin directory. And then take a look at listener configuration file. So I have 2 entries, one for London FarSync and also London FarSync entry for data guard broker. And once you confirm that, you will reload listener. Okay, so we checked listener on host 01, listener on host 02, and host 03, host 04. So once you check that, you keep all 4 terminal windows open for future practice activities. If you have additional minute and additional time, you may want to check the entries by running listener control status. So as you can see, we have a Boston, and you have an instance and status unknown. Unknown means that's a static service registration. We have a DGMGRL static entry, and its status is unknown. And also in the second host, when you check status, same thing. I have entry with unknown, entry with unknown. So this is actually our static service registration indication. Same thing here, and same thing in host shader 4. Okay, so this is for practice 2-2, listener configuration practice.